Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for sticking around for the Caspin story, and thanks to Niv and team for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I think it's been a great format. Really interesting from my perspective to learn about other sectors that we are competing for the investment dollar. And Caspin, as you can see, we're a mineral exploration company, unapologetically in the early exploration stage, where this is where the money is really made in the mining game. Early stage discovery generates a huge amount of value, and so we're talking 10 baggers, 100 baggers, and that sort of stuff. And so that's great, Greg. There's another 1,000 companies that are trying to do the same thing as you are. But what you try to do is minimise the risk, and I think Caspin has a few competitive advantages that provide a point of difference to some of our peers. Quick corporate snapshot. We're coming up to our third anniversary, our third birthday, so we've got a relatively modest capital structure. Some interesting shareholders on the list there, Charles. They become relevant when we get through the presentation. And there's a bit of an Asian flavour there. Look up Tinci Limited. They're a Shenzhen-listed chemical company based in mainland China, and they produce chemical precursors, particularly in lithium and nickel for battery products. So, quite an interesting sort of major shareholder to have on the register. How to reduce risk? Have a really competent board and management team. So I'm a geologist, but John Ronsky there, been known by many people. John has forgotten more than I've ever learnt. Consults to exploration companies or mining companies all around the world, and we are really lucky to have a man of his calibre on our board. Justin Tremaine is also sort of a well-known explorer, operates mostly out of Africa these days, has been there and done that really in the gold space in West Africa. And then Simone Suan rounds out our board, and she provides a bit of a bridge to some of those Asian investor networks that we have in China, Hong Kong and Singapore. And she's got an interesting background. She actually rode the first lithium boom at Bald Hill. So two projects, these are the same two projects that we listed with. Yarrawonda Brook project sort of captured most of people's imagination early on in our life, but more recently we've started to turn our attention to the West Musgrave region, our Mount Squires project out in the Gibson Desert. And that's got a little bit more attention of late because of the Oz Minerals takeover, the BHP takeover of Oz Minerals, and the development of the Nebo Babel mine. That is a massive development. Australia's first nickel sulphide development for many years. Oz committed $1.7 billion to building that mine. I dare say by the time BHP are finished with it, it'll probably have a 2 in front of it. So a massive investment on our doorstep. And we've shaded there BHP's land holding. I haven't counted up. It's tens and thousands of kilometres worth of square kilometres worth of exploration acreage, and we are smack bang right in the middle of it and a long strike from that known mineralised trend. So naturally our focus out in this part of the world is mostly on nickel and copper sulphide, but interestingly when you go out in the frontiers you've got to keep an open mind. You never know what you're going to find, and we have made an interesting rare earth discovery out there as well. So let's just talk about that for a moment. I think the first presenter today actually has talked about how rare earth has kind of come off the boil a little bit in Australia, and it's certainly true. I think there's some of the struggles that the rare earth sector has had in Australia have been well publicised, but you would be surprised by how much attention that generates overseas. Most of the external or international interest in our company is mostly about rare earths. So, this is the thing about Australia, there's pros and cons to being isolated in Australia, and sometimes I think we miss what the rest of the world sees. And I guess what captures people's imagination really about our rare earth story is that it's something different. It's not a carbonatite. Most people know about carbonatites. Dreadnought, Hastings, Linus is the granddaddy of them all. And then there's the clay stories. But our Duchess prospect is something different again. It's a rhyolite host. There's not too many examples of this anywhere in the world, let alone Australia. And I have to admit, we kind of stumbled across this in some of the drilling that we were doing for other things. But that full credit to our geological team. They've got an open mind and they recognise that, hey, this is something a little bit different, and on further investigation, a fantastic rare earths discovery. And what's really important about that is that it's got a really high mix of the heavy rare earths. So most people talk about NdPr, but dysprosium and terbium, the heavy rare earths, that's where the money is. That's the value that dysprosium is about 5 times the NdPr price. So that's the key. And there is next to no heavy rare earth production in Australia today. So that's a point of difference. Now, so all rare earths are rare. All rare earths are generally not rare, but heavies, the dysprosium and terbium, generally aren't. And if you really want leverage into that space, that's where you need to be. So we think that's an interesting opportunity. We've been on the record about talking about, we think, there's an opportunity here to partner with some of the bigger rare earth players, and that's one of the things that we're sort of investigating at the moment. And while we're doing that, we're continuing the nickel copper search. This remains our core focus. We've done a sort of a preliminary sort of reconnaissance style drill program on the project. We've identified the same intrusive host rocks that host Nebo Babel. This is more than 1 million tonnes of contained nickel and more than 1 million tonnes of contained copper, 10 kilometres from our tenement boundary. We've recognised the same rocks continue into our project area. There's the occasional expression of that at surface. We drilled 2 prospects. The first 2, they were the most obvious. That's usually how you work in exploration. You drill the most obvious target first. Quite often, the most obvious target is not actually the discovery, it's some of the secondary or tertiary kind of targets once you start learning about what you're dealing with. And that's kind of where we're at. I think what we found at surface is pretty much what we found underneath. So that's great, it's sort of proof of concept, but where to from here? And that's where our team is sort of working up now and working into the next stage of our exploration. And then there's the Yarrawinda Brook project. Now, you couldn't ask for 2 totally different sort of environments. We go from the desert into agricultural region just north of Perth. It's an hour's drive from my home, to the project area, so quite conveniently located and all the logistical advantages that come with it. And of course, right on site, long strike from the Chalice to Julimar project. Now, gee, talk about a group that's been beaten up of late. So everybody's got an opinion on Chalice, but I tell you one thing, I would love to give my shareholders a chance to take our $15 million market cap to $3 billion. And that's what Chalice did. It's a remarkable story. One of the great exploration discoveries in recent time. I think probably, in due course, people will realise the true value of that project. There's probably only a handful of people in Australia who can value that project. And they're probably not sitting in broking companies. That's the reality. They're probably sitting in other mining houses. So anyway, in the meantime though, we're exploring the same body of rocks. We've had some success so far. The Serradella prospect was a great discovery. Relatively modest, I must say. The exploration was telling us we need to go down dip. This is not the market to be drilling deep holes. So we're pivoting our focus somewhat to the rest of the project area that we've kind of neglected, to be honest, over the last 12 to 18 months. So that's near surface opportunities. And I think, to be honest, Chalice's story actually works for us to some extent. If you were to say, what does Chalice need? They need high grade nickel. That would make an amazing difference to that project, and I'll be frank, that's kind of what our exploration focus is going forward, and particularly those sort of opportunities close to surface. Thank you. Sorry, actually, I'll just go back one step. Now that you've dinged the bell, I'll go back a step. And look, the other thing that, is just a sort of just to throw the cat amongst the pigeons. Last week we talked about lithium potential in this part of the world. Now, the cynic out there would say, oh God, another guy getting on the bandwagon. But people forget, all the focus for lithium is actually up in the Pilbara mostly, right? One of the talks was in the Gascoyne, but most of the focus for lithium has been in the Pilbara. But the biggest lithium deposit in Australia is right here in the southwest at Greenbushes. Now, and it's the only one. that can't be right, surely. So, so we've been looking at that potential. We've got a bit of a head start on it because we've got a new data set of our own that we can sort of turn our head to and look at that sort of potential. And so conceptually it's right. So that's something that we'll look at in the near future as well. So that's Caspin. I think the point of difference is we've got two great projects in strategic areas alongside some of the big players building mines. So great location, we've got a great team behind us, some really interesting strategic investors. And I think those three components make for a very interesting investment proposition. And the reality is that the value proposition for Caspin has never been better. So get on board.
Great. Ready? Hand it over to the audience for some questions. I'll kick off. So you mentioned that in Australia you're sort of the only heavy rare earths. I mean, is there a reason for that? I mean, are you the only discovery? Could you just sort of talk to a bit of your uniqueness there?
Well, look, I don't want to talk about other people's projects too much, but most of the focus has been on the two styles. There's the carbonatite style, so when and some companies have had great success on that. Dreadnought, Hastings, everybody wants to emulate Linus. That's great. And then the clay style, and that's about ionic clay stories are metallurgical projects, and we're doing so we're those clay stories also have a mix of heavy rare earths as well, but it really comes down to metallurgy. Now I didn't really talk about this, but we have done some prelim work on our the mineralisation date, just trying to prove that you've got something that can be processed. In some respects, you put in the cart before the horse, right? So you find out is this going to be something exotic that can't be processed, or is it something that can go through a pretty conventional plant? And then, if that's the case, go and explore it, and it's open for 300 metres or more, so it's a potential for resource. And I think that's what we're doing. And so, I've forgotten what your question was, but what was the question? What's the point of difference? Why hasn't anybody found this sort of stuff? Because I guess rare earth exploration in Australia has been sort of forgotten about and shunned. People actively tell me, don't go exploring for that. Why? History creates a litter of companies that are being toasted. So, I understand that, and we're cognizant of that, but we're an exploration company, and I think there's potential value there, and that value might not be recognised by somebody in Australia.
Fantastic, Greg. I think it's that time of day where we're starting to think about a beer. But any other questions from the audience?
No, you had your chance.